Hello everyone, and welcome back to our 7-day cybersecurity bootcamp. I'm your host, Marley, and I'm leading you through 7 days of taking your network from insecure where it was possibly to the very secure in day 7. We're focusing every day on a different topic. Today is day 5. We're focusing on firewalls. Exciting, I know. Now, on day 1, we worked on password policies. Day 2 was updates. Day 3 was antivirus and malware. Day 4 was a huge day covering Wi-Fi security and public Wi-Fi security. Today, we're going to focus on firewalls. What is a firewall anyways? A firewall is really the first line of defense. It's like the front guard shack at a military facility. They're always looking out, inspecting everything that comes in to make sure it's not malicious or harmful for the people inside. Same thing your firewall does. It only blocks the bad stuff from coming in. It also inspects the stuff that does allow in to make sure even though you say you're secure, are you truly secure? I remember when I used to enter the base at Marine Corps Air Station El Toro when I was a Marine. Even though my car had a security sticker on it that gave me access to the facility, it didn't matter. Those military police, they would inspect my vehicle every time. They would open the hood, they put mirrors underneath, they check inside, they check me out, just to make sure that I wasn't carrying malicious content. The same thing happens with your firewall. Even though you have a person who's authorized to get into your network, that doesn't mean that they're not carrying malicious content, even if they don't know it. Some people will unknowingly bring bad things into your network if you allow them to. So let's implement the correct firewall to block all that traffic that we don't want, but also to only let out the stuff we want to let out. So stay tuned. We're going to learn a lot today about firewalls. Now's a good time to pause me if you haven't already printed out the supporting documents for today and the workbook to follow along with. There's also some helpful how-tos in there as well, and some screenshots of common firewalls that you can use to configure your firewall for the best security possible. Who am I and why am I teaching this course? My name is Marley. I'm the CEO of Network Computer Solutions, with our primary location being in Warsaw, Indiana. I began my IT security career in 1989 while serving in the United States Marine Corps. While in the Marine Corps, I was deployed to Operation Desert Storm in Saudi Arabia. During that time, we had troops in our unit all the way from the front lines of Baghdad all the way back to Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. I spent a lot of time in Saudi Arabia, and I got to tour all over the countries, other countries as well. We had computers and secure networks all over the country. So what we had to do, and I was put in charge of securing that data to make sure, one, didn't get lost, didn't get breached, didn't get leaked, but two, we were dealing with a very harsh environment. We had computers that we had to track Marines' financial information, personal information, and other secret information the whole time they were in the theater. And we had computers on the very front lines and tents and hooches with blowing sand every night and sandstorms, let alone every other kind of attack you can think of, and Scud missile attacks at night. And we had to make sure no matter what happened, it was that we had a backup and protection and security of all of our data. And believe me, we never lost data under my command. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I went to private enterprise, started working for a small business that did IT support. And I realized that small businesses just don't have the same level of protection as the large enterprises or the military. But yet their data is no less vulnerable or valuable. It's very vulnerable and it's very important to them. A large enterprise might lose a few files and not think much about it. But if you're a small business, you need ultimate protection. You can't afford it. You need to be able to back everything up you have, protect it from intruders, and if something goes wrong, restore it quickly. Well, that was my mission. What can I do to build a company that can offer services to make these small businesses secure and make it affordable for even the smallest of them, but yet make them as secure as the major enterprises? Well, with NCS, we did just that. We developed a system that allows us to proactively manage, monitor, and secure all these environments on a very small scale, charge them that they can afford, and still make it as secure as very large enterprises. I'm very proud of what we've accomplished. Now, what do I do today? I lead a squad of cyber technicians and engineers that we manage IT environments for clients all over the country. Our clients range from all kinds of industries. We have a lot of clients who are in the agriculture, financial services, and healthcare sector. If you think that we can help you and make your network more secure, if you've got questions, reach out to us, comment in the Facebook group, or message me, and we'll discuss how we can make your network more secure. Before we begin, I want to cover something that all practices, processes, and advice provided during this bootcamp is meant to be informational, and all precautions must be taken to back up, protect your systems before any changes are made to configuration files, registries, or software installations. Network Computer Solutions assumes no liability for any harm or damage caused by you acting on our advice. We recommend that all work is performed by a certified and trained IT technician. All trademarks and business names and company names and software names that we mention in this course, and there are a lot of them, all remain the property of their respected owners. Let's review day 4 before we move forward. We talked about Wi-Fi. We talked about separating internal and external networks to keep it secure. We talked about enforcing all security policies with WPA2 Enterprise to make sure you don't have insecure networks. We talked about physically locking your access points away. We talked about limiting the signal so it doesn't reach beyond your office walls very far so that people can't sit outside and get on your Wi-Fi. We talked about blocking rogue access points. We talked about wireless intrusion prevention systems to block these access points and these devices on your network that try to attack and try to be somebody they're not. We talked about mobile device management. That was a huge discussion. There's so many layers there to unpeel, and we'll cover that again in more detail on another course. But you have to have MDM, mobile device management, on your network, on your mobile devices, or no data is allowed on those devices. Good plan. And we talked about limiting support for old legacy devices and how we're going to segment those so they don't cause a conflict on your network. So what do we start with? What is a firewall? A firewall is not an end-all, be-all solution to information security. It used to be if you had a firewall on your network, you were pretty safe. However, they are an essential component to your network infrastructure. It's a security device that monitors all incoming and outgoing traffic and it's able to look and inspect all traffic coming in. If it doesn't like the traffic and it doesn't have specific rules to allow it, it blocks it. So they keep bouncing off and not getting into your network. If they get in, you're in serious trouble. We also set security rules on the firewall to keep data out if we don't want them in. It's been the first line of defense for about 25 years or more. They established a barrier between secure network and the public network and allows only secure network traffic to pass through the firewall. Everybody must have one, whether it's the one that's provided by the internet provider, which I prefer you don't have, or enterprise product. And they range anywhere, and they get from anywhere from being almost free, provided by a provider, to a very expensive firewall. And they all do different things, and you have to discuss it with your IT provider as far as which level you want and you have in your budget. You know, I want to talk about best practices for firewalls. Firewalls are very difficult to cover in detail on this particular course. The supporting documentation has more information, but I'm going to cover the best practices. You want to maintain physical security. You want to make sure that physical access to the closet or the room that has your firewall is restricted, locked, and monitored via security camera if possible. Because if somebody had access to that firewall, they can make changes to it or exchange it out and give themselves access from remote outside to basically eliminate the whole need for the purpose of the firewall. So make sure you get physical security. You want to update it. The firewall's operating system is not a set it, forget it. It's not Ron Popeil. You can't just forget about it. It's constantly it's an evolving, moving target. If the firewall doesn't change and get updated, then it could allow malicious content in. Much like your Windows PC updates we talked about on day 2, the firewall has constant updates as well, firmware updates, and you have to be able to update those and test them on a regular basis. You want to make sure that you turn on logging and alerting, and you want to use a secure syslog server. That's pretty difficult. I can't explain it all in this particular course. Contact me, ask questions in the Facebook group, and you'll see that people can help you. But a secure server separate from your firewall, so if anything happens, it sends these alerts and these messages out to the secure server, so even if somebody stole your firewall or crashed, you would still have logs of everything that changed on your firewall. Very important if you're going to start looking for doing forensics on an attack, you can find out when the changes are made and who made them. You want to regularly monitor the firewall logs. Treat those logs as business records and keep them in your data retention policy. Just like your important financial records, those logs are very critical to your security success. Change management. This is something that anytime a change is requested to the firewall, you have to ask, really you go back to our security formula, the 5 W's plus H equals security. That applies to your firewall as well. Think about that. You have to know who, what, where, when, and why, and you must also know how, but you have to know that because whenever a change is requested, it has to go through, in my opinion, a change committee. They have to look at all the ramifications, all the risk, all the liabilities, and all the benefits and see which one weighs out. Sometimes the risks are not worth the reward. The rewards are not worth the risk. So you want to make sure you do that. Make sure you document in a policy, in a book, in a manual somewhere, why you changed it, when and how, and what it was before. And always back up your configuration before making any changes so you can always go back easily. Penetration testing. I mean, who doesn't want to be a penetration tester? That is a very fun thing. Think about it. What you're constantly doing is going from outside the network and you're penetrating networks to try to get in. You're trying all the secret tactics that you know as an ethical hacker to try to get into that network. If you find software flaws or weaknesses in the firewall and you gain access, it gives you a good idea of how to fix it. You also, some companies will even employ outside penetration testers. We do it for our clients that we can actually set up a system that will automatically attack your firewall to see if we can get in. If we do, then we know how to fix it, and we'll try to, solidify that so anyone else can't get in. It's a very important part of your firewall best practice. Subscriptions and services. Most firewalls today have a subscription service you can buy. Part of that subscription service allows you to do other services as well, like maybe an antivirus protection, ransomware protection, spam filtering. All that stuff can be done on the firewall itself at a different level. It'll give you one extra layer of protection, but you have to subscribe to those services. And if you don't have a current subscription on your firewall, there's a really good chance that you're not getting any updates or any firmware updates. So anything that comes in new that your firewall firmware is not familiar with, chances are it may not block it. And if you need support from the manufacturer on how to configure a rule or maybe a replacement of a firewall, if you don't have a current subscription, there's a good chance you may not be getting support for that product either. And if you do put it back in the subscription after it expired, some manufacturers make you pay a penalty to get that active again. Keep that in mind. You want to always back up your configurations of your firewalls. I can't say that enough. It's easy to make a change or multiple changes to try to make something work, or try to make your VoIP phones work, or try to make a remote access program work, and the next thing you know, you've made a dozen changes and you've not documented those changes, but now something else is broken. You don't know where to go back to and what to undo to make it work again. So the best thing you can do is do a backup of the configuration before you make any changes. And if you don't make changes to your firewall, I would at least make a backup config at least once a month and store those in a secure location off-site in encrypted format so that you can get those back if you need them. Treat your backups of your firewall just like you do your financial records, your most important data, because without that information, you could take a lot of time rebuilding, restructuring everything you've already gotten to work so well. So every time you make a change, even the slightest change, make a backup, label it what the change was for that backup, enter it into your change management log so you know which backup could take you back to which spot. It sounds kind of tedious and redundant, but trust me, if you ever have to restore a firewall from something that crashed or something that doesn't work, you'll be thankful you followed this advice. And the next thing is audit, audit, audit. You want to always perform at least once a year audits to compare to make sure everything in your logbooks matches everything physically configured on the device. It's so easy for somebody to get in and make a quick change to a firewall, an IP address change or opening a rule or a port and not doing it correctly. Anytime the word any, A-N-Y, is used in a firewall, it's probably a bad thing. But typically engineers, if they're not quite sure what they're doing, they're not certified, they're not following the right procedures, and if they're not being checked up on, what happens is if they can't make something work, we've seen it where they put a any statement, meaning allow anything from this IP address to penetrate your firewall, or allow anything to get out to any IP address. Anytime you see the word any, question it and try to narrow it down to specific IP addresses or specific protocols to keep your network as secure as possible. You never want to use any. You want to try to use IP addresses that filter out especially foreign countries who are constantly attacking you. And if you do like voice over IP, you know off the hand who the IP address of your provider is. You also know if you're using Office 365, you know who the provider is. And you can get those IP addresses very easily so that you don't have to open it up to any IP address in the world just to use a simple remote access or phone or something like that. So always audit it and make sure it matches what's on the documentation matches what's in the firewall. If not, document it well and fix it. Another thing you might want to consider is outsourcing the management of your firewall. As a business owner, CEO, and you're watching this course, you're probably overwhelmed. How can I, a professional in my industry, know about how to manage a firewall? Well, we don't expect you to, but we expect you to have policies in place that you can know what question to ask and how to audit to make sure it's done correctly, how to make sure the procedures are done correctly. But you should also look at outsourcing it to a professional company who has a security operations center who can manage the firewall correctly, and then consult with them when you need to make firewall changes. There's a good chance that third-party vendors like heating, cooling, or remote access vendors or copier guy, they may request remote access and they may request you open a firewall port to get into their software. Well, the first thing a person like me would do is I would question it. I'd talk to them. I'd find an alternative method because I never want to open a port on a firewall. Let me explain what a port on a firewall does. Let's just say you have a large building that is your company. On that building, there are 10,000 doors and windows. Sounds like a lot, but you got to manage that many. Every vendor, customer, or application requires one of the different slots on those 10,000 windows. And you have to open up specific ports. So when you open up a port, say window or door number 5,000, don't you want to also specify who can get in and when they can get in and where they're coming from? Let's say port 5,000 is only for use for your delivery drivers who come in every day to deliver packages. We put a code on that door that's unlocked only when the driver knows the code to get in. And we also verify that they are the valid person. That's how a firewall is opened. You never open a door on your company. Think about this. A company that in your office you have all your inventory, your personal secrets, your intellectual property, all your personnel records, all your financial records. You never open a door or a window, leave it open 24/7, have no security at all, and just leave and go home for the night. Well, that's what people do with their firewall. They open a port because some third party asked them to, and they left it wide open. So anybody who wants to walk by can stick their head in, look around. If no one's there, they walk into your company, look around, steal all the goodies from your environment, your inventory, maybe your personal secrets. They can do it from anywhere in the world. They can steal your intellectual property and your personal files. They then can take them and you never know it because you're not logging, you're not monitoring, you left that port open. A port being open on a firewall is nothing more than a big door being left open on your company, and every person who drives by every day can stick their head in and see what's inside. Think about that. Do you want that? No. So if you're not certified and trained in managing your firewall, then I recommend you outsource it, but you still have to manage the outsource relationship and ask them for the audit logs to make sure they're doing exactly what you pay them to do. Internal firewalls. You can also use firewalls inside your network. It's not popular on smaller networks, but when you have multiple departments, you can use firewalls internally to keep the manufacturing people from getting into the financial network or the design network, and keep your engineers out of finance, and keep everybody in the company out of your top secret R&D department. That can all be done internally with use of firewalls to segment traffic inside your network. A UTM, Unified Threat Management. It's very common on today's firewalls. And you want to make sure you implement those on your appliance. No matter what brand you have, they all have pretty much a UTM. And on that is things that you can turn on and turn off. Now there's a lot of services that you might want to turn off on your firewall to keep things from slowing down. A lot of the firewalls by default are opened up too much. But a UTM adds multiple layers of protection at the gateway level before you get to the internet. Things it can do is like intrusion detection systems, host-based antivirus. It scans every file coming in for spam and viruses, web content filtering. How do you keep your employees from going to sites and wasting time that you don't want them to? Whether it be porn, gambling, Facebook, social media, weapons, hate crimes, whatever it is, you have no idea what they're doing. You can stop that at the firewall level to make sure they don't go to sites that waste time. We also can block it to make sure that they don't get to sites that have ransomware and malware built into those, so you don't get those on your network. That's all built into the UTM on your firewall. We also have the ability to do reverse proxies. That's kind of complicated, but it's a remote access method that makes it very secure. We'll talk about that in more detail. If you need it, reach out to us. We'll get into detail and talk about those. You have to enforce the security policies on the firewall. You have to make sure that the rules are consistent and they match your organization's written security policy. That's part of that audit process we talked about earlier. You have to make sure that your firewall enforces what your policy states, and that you don't let your employees or your contractors utilizing your network get away with doing things that you do not allow. Your firewall is a final line of defense for that. Okay, with firewalls, there are rules. We create rules to keep people in or keep people out of your office. And the way that works is it's a series of rules in chronological order from top to bottom. And what you want to do is you want to keep it simple. Keep it so simple that if someone who's totally, not well versed in firewalls, if they can look and understand in simple terminology what's allowed and what's not, then it's probably better off. Anytime you have redundant or unneeded, unnecessary, or complicated rules, it'll slow down the time that the traffic coming through the network and make your internet connection slow. It'll also make your firewall work harder, utilizing more processes, which then makes it slow. So keep it simple, always. The first thing you do is deny all traffic. Think about that. I'm pulling up to a military base in a car, and the first thing they do is they stop all traffic. Then I have to show who I am and prove it before they inspect me to allow me on. So the rule should always be treat your network as though it's a military establishment, top secret, and deny everything immediately, and then below tell it what is allowed. Stateful inspection. Let's go back to that. I like basing it on a military entrance. A lot of you have been to those environments. Even though you deny all traffic, stop, and then you allow it in based on who you are and credentials, you still want to inspect that vehicle as it passes through the gate before you allow it. And that's what happens with stateful inspection. It means that you're going to filter all the packets, all the traffic. You're going to look under it, over it, inside of it, and you're going to question that person and that data before you let it into your network. You're going to make sure it's clean. And you got to make sure that there's a SANS top 20 vulnerability list. It's published almost every year, SANS. Google it. You'll find if you can meet those requirements on your firewall and your rules, then you're probably pretty safe. Change the password on your firewall. Change the password for the admin and the root account. Too often we find that the manufacturer password or the default password is still in effect when we take over a network. They've had it in effect for many years and they never changed the password. People from outside the internet, from outside your office, can connect through a remote access connection. All firewalls use pretty much a standard remote port, unless it's blocked by the IT manager, and then they can get in and change anything they want to change. Once they're into your firewall, people can authorize remote access. I mean, they can give themselves remote access, and they can make it to where you can't see it. They could even build their own virtual private networks to allow them to suck all your data out, monitor all your traffic, and you would never know it if you're not monitoring the logs, looking at your logs, and looking at your rules, and making sure that everything is in line. So the first line of protecting your firewall always is to change the password immediately out of the box so it's not the standard password. Well, that's firewalls. There's a lot more to it than that, but if I do too much on this course, I don't want to lose you. I include a lot more documentation, so follow along, look at the printed materials, reach out to us, or also look at the manufacturer's website for the firewall that you have and get training on that. But we talked about keeping your firewall rules simple and easy to understand. Make a document of all rules and changes. We want to make sure you have a change policy in effect and run it through a change committee or a change board every time somebody asks for a modification of your rules. Make sure it goes through enough people so that you're not responsible for that change and that a security breach is not in your future. Big deal. Update the firewall firmware and services at all times. Keep the passwords changed to complex passwords, never simple words. Keep it complex and document it somewhere. And no one needs to know the password to your firewall except you and maybe one or two trusted advisors that you have. Use a unified threat UTM system to keep all the services up to date and do things like firewall and advanced services. Perform vulnerability penetration testing and document all the results. Anytime you get a weakness, you want to perform more tests and go deeper until you no longer have those weaknesses, and then document what you did and make backup configs of every step along the way so you can undo it one step at a time in case you have a failure. Don't do a bunch of changes and not back it up between it, because then it makes it more difficult. You'll waste a lot of time and you'll have to start over from scratch if you do. And last but not least, you may want to consider outsourcing your firewall management and your security to a managed services security company like Network Computer Solutions. We can bring a lot of experience to you and make sure you're safe and bring the policies and procedures you're looking for to secure your network. Well, thank you for joining me on day 5. Tomorrow is a big day. On day 6, stay tuned, and we're going to learn a lot tomorrow about data security, or something you might refer to as backup and disaster recovery. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you tomorrow.